Hello guys, it's Layla. I'm going to do this video of classes I took at Rutgers, an honest review of all of the classes I took at Rutgers. I just graduated this past May. I was a cell biology neuroscience major on the pre-med track, and I did finish my degree in 3 years rather than the traditional 4, and these are the classes I took. So I'm going to start with classes I transferred in. I came into Rutgers, I believe, with 36 credits, if I remember correctly, and some of those were AP classes, some of those were community college classes that I took in high school because my local community college actually allowed high school students to independently register for up to 8 community college credits per semester. So I would take those classes online over breaks. They were usually over Zoom, I believe. Some of them were just asynchronous as well. So for my AP credits, I did take AP biology. I scored a 4 on AP biology, and scoring a 4 or higher on AP biology actually transfers to 10 Rutgers credits. It covers Gen Bio 1, Gen Bio 2, and Gen Bio Lab, which ends up being 10 credits because each of the Gen Bios is 4 and then Lab is 2. So I did get really lucky with that. I also took a push in high school. I got a score of 4 on that as well, and that transferred to 3 credits, which transfers to a Rutgers American History class that fulfills a School of Arts and Sciences core requirement. The core code is on the screen. And then lastly, I did take AP Calculus AB. I scored a 5 on that, and that transfers to 4 credits. It covers Calculus 1 for Life and Social Sciences, which is a pre-med requirement as well as a requirement for my major. Additionally, in community college, I took Gen Psych, which transferred to 3 credits and fulfilled an SAS core code. I put the code on the screen as well. I took Pre-Calculus, which fulfills an SAS core code as well. I took English Comp 1 and 2. Each of them were 3 credits. It did not cover anything, but it did give me 6 credits to contribute to that total 120 you need to reach. And then I did take 2 sociology classes. One of them did cover a core code, I believe, but that was just an additional 6 credits, and sociology is highly recommended for pre-meds. My first semester, when I was a freshman, I took 15.5 credits. I took Calculus 2 for Life and Social Sciences. This was a pre-med, it's not a requirement, but it's highly suggested. And then it was also it did fulfill a requirement for my major. I took it with Professor Michael Woodbury. Me personally, I did not enjoy my experience with that professor. I do know people who liked his class. I personally just found his teaching style a little bit disorganized for my taste, and it was often difficult to try to keep up with what he was teaching because he did not really reference any specific text or any specific structure. He kind of just taught from writing on the chalkboard, so that was just not a class that worked well for me. However, I did complete it, and I believe I finished with a B. Then I took Gen Chem 1 as well that semester. That is a CBN and pre-med requirement. I took it with Professor Langowski. Professor Langowski, in my opinion, is the best of the Gen Chem professors. When I took Gen Chem, it was being run by Dr. Paul Kimmel, the class director. The director of the general chemistry department was Dr. Paul Kimmel. It is now Dr. Langowski. So he not only teaches, I think he teaches 2 lectures groups, but he also runs the department, so he is writing the exams, and I believe he's writing the homeworks as well. But he is honestly a great teacher. I really enjoyed learning Gen Chem from him. And I had Dr. Robert Young as a recitation instructor. Unfortunately, he no longer works at Rutgers, but he honestly was so sweet. He was great at explaining things, and I really enjoyed his class. We've connected on LinkedIn and stayed in touch. He also did write one of my recommendation letters for medical school, so I greatly appreciate that. That same semester, I also took expository writing, which is a writing class that all students up until I believe the fall of 2023 had to take. It is an extinct class. It was replaced with a different version. I believe it's called like college writing or something. And that's required for literally everyone to take. I think it's like a requirement in all the schools at Rutgers. And I had Professor Jennifer Bryan. I did like her as a professor. I didn't like the grading scheme of expository writing, and that was known as one of the most difficult required classes at Rutgers. Everyone who took expository writing knew expository writing was a really tedious and difficult class. I personally didn't like the grading scheme because I felt as though it was less so graded on a specific rubric and more so graded on the professor's own like requirements, if that makes sense. So like if I had a different expository writing professor, I may have had a different experience altogether. The writing department does offer tutoring for expository writing. I personally did not find that helpful. I did attend a couple of tutoring sessions. I don't know, maybe I just wasn't set up with the right tutor, but I found that it was more helpful for me personally to take advantage of office hours and meet one-on-one with my professor before our drafts were due to sort of find out what she was looking for in our papers. And then that semester I also took Molecules of Life, which was an elective class that fulfilled one of the SAS core requirements. The code is on the screen as well. I took that with Dr. Sharon Crane. I really enjoyed it. She was a very sweet professor. She was very relaxed, but a great teacher. I took that class with my friend Cushy, so we both really enjoyed that. And it is like kind of a pre-intro to biochem. It's like super basic biochem. Again, it's not like really biochem, but it's like super easy 100 level biochem adjacent, if that makes sense. So I did really enjoy that class. I found it interesting and I liked the professor. And then my first semester, I also took a FIG seminar. A FIG seminar is a 1.5 credit course available to first year students. It's a first year interest group seminar. I believe that's what FIG stands for. I took mine. It had something to do with medicine. I don't quite recall. My instructor was Catherine Krakta. I think that's how you say her last name. So the FIGS seminars are actually taught by an upperclassman. So at the time, Catherine was a senior. And they basically tell you about their journey with fulfilling the requirements of whatever interest group you're in. So for us, it was pre-med. And they teach you about like research, clubs, stuff like that. It's just a group where you're basically learning about like whatever your interest group is in. So for us, it was pre-med. Catherine is currently a student at University of Florida School of Medicine, I believe. So she did succeed. So it was good to get advice from somebody that was an upperclassman when we were just starting. And you also get to meet other students that are in similar majors that you're probably going to recognize in your future classes. Then spring 2023, I took 15 credits. I took Gen Chem 2. Again, I took Professor Langowski. I really liked his teaching style. And then I took my recitation with Professor Kornienko. I really, really loved Professor Kornienko. She was a great teacher. I found her really helpful. I don't know if I said, I got a B+ in Gen Chem 1, a B in expository writing, an A in Molecules of Life, and FIGS was pass-fail. Back to Gen Chem 2. I did take it with Dr. Kornienko for my recitation. I really enjoyed her, and she is the professor that leads the teaching internship department, which I did end up doing later in my pre-med career. Again, Gen Chem 2 is a pre-med/CBN requirement, and just like Gen Chem 1, I did get a B+ in that. Gen Physics 1, I took that same semester. It was hybrid because I took it off season. So like usually you take 1 in the fall, 2 in the spring, but I took 1 in the spring and then 2 the following fall. So because it was off season, you watched all your lecture videos online and you did your recitation in person. My personal experience, I highly recommend you do not sign up for a recitation that is Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday, because the homeworks that were due every week were usually due Wednesday at 11:59 p.m. So I found it more difficult to be able to take my I found it less useful to take my recitation on Wednesday. I had Wednesday recitation both times I took physics 1 and 2. Like, not both times. Like, when I took physics 1 and when I took physics 2, I had a Wednesday recitation. I personally wish that I had not signed up for a Wednesday recitation, because if you have any questions about the material from that week, your recitation is the only like face-to-face time you're getting with an instructor when you're taking it off season. So obviously you don't want your only face-to-face time to be right before the homework is due, because then you can't really get it done as well prior and you're kind of rushing to complete it last minute. And I got a B+ in Gen Physics 1. Did not do so well in Gen Physics 2, but Gen Physics 1 I did pretty well. Intro to Experimentation is the Gen Chem lab. It is a CBN and pre-med requirement. I forgot to say Gen Physics is also a CBN and a pre-med requirement. Gen Chem lab was super easy. I actually really enjoyed it. Some of the labs were virtual using like a simulator on a website, and some were in person. I also just wanted to mention that my freshman year, we were still kind of coming down from COVID, and spring 2023 is when the Rutgers strike was. So we did have some curriculum changes that might not be the current curriculum for those courses now. But I really enjoyed Intro to Experimentation. It was a really fun lab. I enjoyed my lab partner, and that is also taught by either your lab instructor is either a grad student or somebody that is completing the TI program. And I did get an A in that class. Gen Physics Lab 1 was another CBN and pre-med requirement. I don't remember who my instructor was. I do remember I did not enjoy Gen Physics Lab 1. I did enjoy Gen Physics Lab 2, but I did not enjoy Gen Physics Lab 1. I found it really tedious, and I wasn't really interested in what we were learning, which it's interesting because I preferred Gen Physics 1 lecture over Gen Physics 2 lecture, but I prefer Gen Physics 2 lab over Gen Physics 1 lab. I don't know why, but I did get an A in Gen Physics 1 lab. And then I also took 2 asynchronous courses that semester. Minority Groups in American Society was an asynchronous course I took that fulfilled one of the SAS core codes. I put that code on the screen as well. And then I also took Current Moral and Social Issues, which was another asynchronous class that fulfilled an SAS core code. I did take it with Professor Frances Cam. I did enjoy her. However, one thing about her is she records her lecture videos super late at night and not really with a particular pattern. Like, they're always posted by a certain date, but you never really know when within the week she's going to post them. And it's usually uploaded at like 3 a.m. I honestly don't know why, but that class, it was heavy in reading for sure, but I did pretty well in it. And Professor Cam actually did end up writing one of my recommendation letters because I did get an A in that course. It was sort of like an ethics type course. And Minority Groups in American Society, I got a B+. So summer 2025, I did take 1 class. I took Gen Physics Lab 2. What's really interesting is you actually don't need to take Gen Physics 2 before you take the lab. You would think that one would be a prerequisite for the other, or that they would be co-requisites, but surprisingly, that's not the case. I did find it more difficult to do Gen Physics Lab before having taken the lecture portion. But as long as you review the material for the lecture before you actually go in, it's really not that bad. And that's another CBN pre-med requirement that I did get an A in. When you take it over the summer, you usually go in twice a week for 3 hours. It never takes the full 3 hours, but you do go in twice a week in person. You can't take that one online. Fall 2023, I took 18 credits. This was a rather stressful semester for me. All of my second year was a rather stressful and academically challenging year for me personally. But fall 2023, I took Gen Physics 2. Again, it was off season, so it was hybrid. and that is a pre-med and CBN requirement. I did not do as well in Gen Physics 2 as I did in Gen Physics 1. Full transparency, I did get a C, which that was the first C I had ever gotten. It was really difficult for me to see that on my transcript. That was a rough semester. I took Organic Chemistry 1 at the same time as taking Gen Physics 2. I don't know if that contributed to me not performing as well as I did in Gen Physics 1. It could have been, but with Organic Chemistry 1, I took it with Professor Kiran Jotsethi. This was before the recitation was mandatory. From what I've heard from my friends that are in classes below me, it is now mandatory to attend recitation, and there are recitation quizzes that contribute to your grade, which we did not have. I really liked Professor Sethi. I feel like she was very invested in us succeeding in the class. She offered like last minute study sessions on Zoom before lectures. I got a B in that class, so I did okay. Obviously not my best work, but it was fine. And I found it really helpful to ask people in grades above me for their practice exams and their exams that they had in their classes and use that as practice exams. So I would always be doing that. I'm saying so much. I'm so sorry. I took Fundamentals of Neurobiology that semester as well, which was my first CBN requirement class. With CBN, you have to take 2 of these fundamental classes and then also take 3 advanced level CBN classes. And that's in addition to all of your other science requirements that you have to take for the major. But like specifically that major, you have to take 2 fundamentals and then 3 required, and then choose from a list of electives. I took that with Professor Shu Su. I really liked her. I felt that she was invested in us doing well in the course. The course material was really interesting, and she also did well at providing like recordings of the lectures and quiz reviews and stuff that was really efficient for studying. I did get a B+ in that class. I almost got an A, but I did not. I think I was like a couple points off of the final from finishing the class with an A, which was unfortunate. But I did really like that class. I also took Principles in Literary Study that semester. That fulfills 2 SAS cores, and it is taught by a grad student, so there's not like a set curriculum. It kind of goes off of the grad student that's teaching its interests. I liked that class. We did do a lot of reading. We read some interesting books, and the writing was not so heavy, which was always lovely. I also took asynchronously that semester, public speaking, which sounds like an oxymoron, public speaking asynchronously. You did have to record yourself giving a presentation, and you had to have at least 4 audience members that were college aged in the background. So that was a little bit difficult to coordinate at times. I would have to coerce my sorority sisters to stay back like 20 minutes after chapters so that they can be my audience. And you have to record it in a manner where you can see the audience and see yourself. So that was interesting. I would not imagine public speaking being asynchronous, but that did fulfill a core code as well that I put on the screen. And then fall 2023 was my first semester as a Gen Chem TI. A Gen Chem TI is a teaching intern for the general chemistry department. You can apply if you got a B+ or higher in both Gen Chem 1, Gen Chem 2, and Gen Chem Lab. So I did fulfill those requirements and applied and interviewed and did end up getting the position. When you are a Chem TI, it is an unpaid position, and you can either teach problem-solving sessions along with a co-TI, or you can sign up to be a TI for the active learning workshops, which are you're working with groups of students alongside professors that are coordinating all the activities. I chose to do that because I did an active learning workshop. I did have to take 2 credits in internship in chemistry, and internship in chemistry itself is just like a discussion post-based class. It's not really heavy, but you do have trainings every week for your ALW if you choose to do that. And then if you're just doing problem solving sessions, you do have to meet with Dr. Kornienko once a week in one of the allotted like training sessions to go over what you're doing that week. Winter 2024, I took basic stats for research asynchronous. This was another pre-med requirement. I wasn't planning on taking it. However, most medical schools do require you take some statistics class. So I took it over winter break and I got a B+. Spring 2024 was probably one of my hardest semesters. Full transparency, I did initially begin with 17 credits. However, I did end up dropping one of my classes because that proved to be too much with working full-time or working part-time, volunteering. I was preparing for my MCAT retake, and I was also in several clubs. So I did end up dropping a class, but that semester I took Organic Chemistry 2, same thing with Professor Sethi, pre-med CBN requirement. Did not do as well. I did get a C in that as well, which was really difficult for me. I took Organic Chemistry Lab, pre-med CBN requirement. I really enjoyed Organic Chemistry Lab. The labs itself were pretty easy. The pre-lab and post-lab work were a little bit tedious, but it was super fun, honestly. And I got an A in that. I took Systems Physiology that semester. I took it with Dr. Cassandra Nelson, who is unfortunately no longer teaching at Rutgers. She was an absolutely incredible professor, and I really enjoyed her class. CBN elective, you do have to take one CBN elective from an approved list, so that fulfilled my CBN elective requirement. And I highly recommend taking Systems Physiology because I found the information I learned in that class really useful when I was preparing for the MCAT. Again, took internship in chemistry. You take that every semester at UTI. I was an ALW TI, so I did take 2 credits. And then I took Intro to Biochem and Molecular Biology. This is unfortunately another extinct class that was replaced by a different requirement. And I took it with Professor Gabriel Viejas. I personally found his teaching style also not suited for me. He did a lot of reading off the screen, and then I found his tests were honestly really difficult and, in my opinion, did not match up to what he was going over in lecture, even though they were open note. With open note exams, I personally dislike them because I feel like they focus on really minute details. Fall 2024 was this past fall. I took 14 credits. I took genetics with Professor, I think her first name was Doreen Glodowski. Professor Glodowski is a CBN and pre-med requirement, and the way that genetics is organized is a little bit different than your traditional class. Genetics, it's kind of, I don't want to say it's a flipped classroom, but it's really interesting. You're in person twice a week, once for recitation and once for these things called TWIGs. TWIG stands for This Week in Genetics. And you watch your lecture videos online and you do your homework online, and then TWIG, you do like practice with Professor Glodowski using a clicker system on the previous week's material, and then recitation, you're covering that week's material and taking your recitation quiz and doing your recitation work for the lecture videos you watched that current week. I honestly really liked genetics. I found it really interesting. I really liked the structure of the course. With the way that the course was structured, I didn't feel that I had to put in a lot of like extra work to study. I feel like I did my materials, I did my coursework, I did some additional studying, but I didn't feel like I was teaching myself the way you feel in some other of those pre-med requirements, which genetics is both a pre-med requirement and a requirement for my major. That same semester, I took Fundamentals of Cell Biology. It's another CBN requirement. That is the class that I attempted to take the previous spring but ended up withdrawing from. With Fundamentals of Cell Biology, there is 3 modules, and each module has a different professor. I believe I finished that course with a B, and I finished genetics with an A. I also took systems physiology lab that semester. Like I said previously, systems physiology was my CBN elective that I chose, and then I also needed to pick one elective lab, so systems physiology lab fulfilled that requirement. I personally was not the biggest fan of this lab. This is the only lab I've ever taken in college that I did not get an A in. I got a B plus. I honestly found this lab to be kind of disorganized in the grading scheme, in that they did not give us specific requirements for what they wanted our post labs and lab reports to include. They did not give really good feedback when grading those post labs / lab reports, and I feel like every report I was getting contradictory feedback from my TA. So I just didn't enjoy that class. The actual labs themselves were really cool. I liked them. And they never took the full 3 hours, which is always lovely with a lab, especially I had that one. And I also took internship in chemistry that semester. Like I said, you take it every semester that you TI. This was my last semester being a TI. I honestly, I enjoyed the TI program. I think I learned a lot and how to explain difficult concepts to other people. And it also really reinforced my knowledge of general chemistry. I feel that general chemistry might be one of the subjects I've come out of college knowing the best. And that's probably because I had to teach it and explain these concepts. And then that same semester, I took elementary Russian for Russian speakers. This honestly was one of my favorite classes I ever took in undergrad. Elementary Russian for Russian speakers is a class that Rutgers offers specifically for native Russian speakers who had no formal education. So it was a really small class, there was only 8 of us. So me and my other 7 classmates, we all grew up in similar situations. Our parents are from former USSR countries, so we grew up speaking Russian, and for most of us it was our first language, but we never had any formal education. So a lot of us didn't know how to read or write the language, and we had no formal grammar training. So this class was designed specifically for people like us, just because Rutgers does have a really large Russian, and specifically Russian Jewish population. So this course was designed for those people. And I took it with Professor Svetlana Bogomolna. I really liked her as a professor. It was a lot of work, very tedious. However, I honestly highly, highly, highly recommend it if you are also a native Russian speaker who doesn't know how to read or write, because when I went into that class in September, I did not know how to read Russian. I did not know how to write Russian. I spoke very well, I would say almost fluently, because that's what I grew up speaking, and I speak to my grandmother every day in Russian. But I had no formal grammar education, and I had no reading and writing skills. And when I finished the course in December, I could read children's books, short story vibes. I could probably read a book. It would take me a really long time to read a book, like a full adult length book, just because I did only take it for one semester. I'm sure over time I'll improve upon my ability to read. And I can now write pretty well. I am able to text with my grandmother exclusively in Russian now, which is really nice. I honestly 100% recommend that class. If the intermediate level, which is offered the following semester, didn't overlap with a required course for my major, I probably would have taken the intermediate level as well. But unfortunately, I couldn't, because there was a requirement for my major that overlapped with the time that course was offered. And then lastly, spring 2025, this past semester, and I got an A in elementary Russian for Russian speakers. Spring 2025, this past semester, I took 12 credits. These were mostly my CBN advanced requirements. So I had mentioned before that you're required to take 3 of the advanced cell biology neuroscience courses that are I think there's like 9 options and you have to select at least 3 of them. So I took clinical neurobiology, which, like I said, is one of the CBN requirements. I took it with Dr. Martin Grumet. I honestly thought this class was not horrible. I didn't think it was too difficult. The exams were open note, which is always lovely. But like I said, with open note exams, you do have more like specific, minute details that questions ask on rather than like broader concepts, just because you do have access to your notes. And the professor himself, he wasn't horrible. He wasn't like the best. I did appreciate that he recorded all his lectures. So I was able to go back and review them before it came time for the exam, and I'm able to like pause on certain spots to make sure I got all of the content in my notes. So that was always really helpful. I appreciated that. Now, it is usually split into 2 professors, but the second professor was actually unable to teach this semester, so Dr. Grumet taught the entire course. I also took advanced developmental biology this past semester. This is another CBN requirement. It has 2 different professors, Dr. Arnold Heidemann and Dr. Natasha O. Brown. Dr. Heidemann teaches the first 2 modules and Dr. O. Brown the last 2 modules. Clinical neurobio, I got a B+. With advanced developmental bio, this course is actually very unique in that it's mixed with graduate students. So the graduate students in the course have the same lecture material, same exams. However, their final project that they had to do was a bit more involved than the ones that the undergrads had to do. The undergrads, we had this like last project that we had to do where we had to select a research article in the field of developmental biology and write sort of like a review analysis of it. That's what we had to do. I'm not quite sure what the grad students had to do, but from my understanding, it was a lot more involved. And I did get a B in that class. Then I also took neurobiology of pain and addiction. This was another one of those CBN requirements. I honestly really, really enjoyed this class. It was really interesting, and I honestly found it like not that hard at all. I thought that it was very engaging and it was pretty easy to do well in the course. They designed it in a manner that doing well was not something that was really difficult to attain. Obviously, you still had to work at it, but it wasn't as difficult as, say, like organic chemistry or something. And with this class, there was 3 separate modules, 3 professors. My professors were Dr. Kevin Kwan taught the first module, or Kelvin Kwan. Kelvin Kwan taught the first module. Dr. Victoria Abrera taught the second module, and Dr. Santiago Cuesta taught the third module. My personal favorite of the 3 was Dr. Abrera. I really enjoyed her teaching style. I enjoyed the content of her module, and I had previously done a virtual research internship through her lab, but I never got to actually meet her because, like I said, it was a virtual research internship where we were primarily doing computational work and like reviewing lab footage and doing analysis on that rather than like physically doing the lab work. So it was nice to actually take a course with her and meet her in person after doing her lab internship 2 years prior, actually. And I did really enjoy that class, and I did get an A in that class. And then the last class that I have that I took in undergrad is LGBTQ public health. This was an asynchronous course that I took this past semester. I took it out of personal interest. If you guys don't know, I am planning on going to medical school, if you couldn't guess by all the pre-med stuff. And once I complete my medical school education, I will hopefully like to do my residency in plastic surgery, or, I mean, depending on like the match process, I'll probably also apply to general surgery residencies in hopes of doing a plastic fellowship afterwards. But my ultimate end goal would be to specialize in reconstructive surgery with a focus on gender affirming care. So, LGBTQ public health was a class that I thought would be really interesting for me personally, with that being my ultimate career goal right now. Obviously, I completely understand that people go into medical school with one specialty in mind as an MS1, and when they're graduating, they've matched into a specialty that MS1 them didn't even consider, but MS4 them had fallen in love with over their clinical education. So obviously, my career goals could change, but I figured this is my goal right now, and also this is something I'm really interested in. So I took that class with Professor Kelly Haviland. I really enjoyed the class. It was pretty easy to do well. I don't think it was too difficult to keep up with the material. Honestly, I didn't even purchase the textbook. For this class, I felt it was unnecessary, but also I am somebody who has a lot of knowledge in like queer culture and LGBTQ issues, just because that is what I want to do for my career, and also like that community is one that I'm involved with. So I personally found that I didn't learn as much as I thought I would, but I enjoyed the class nevertheless.
Okay, I did not like how my outro for this video turned out, but I did take a total of 128 credits during undergrad. I finished with a 3.445 GPA, which I personally am not thrilled with. I wish I could have done better, but at this point, there's nothing I can do. I honestly recommend not doing what I did and finishing in 3 years. In my personal opinion, um, if I had taken the full 4 years and taken my time, maybe even spread out my courses a little bit more, I probably would have done better in some of them, especially those pre-med like weed out courses. And I think that I probably would have done better on the MCAT ultimately if I had given myself more of a like a longer period of time to prepare. But um that's my mistake. Obviously, if you think you can handle it, do it. And ultimately, graduating a year early is saving me a large sum of money, which is always lovely, especially when you're pre-med. You know that you're most likely going to go into serious debt in order to complete your education. So saving even a year's worth of undergraduate tuition is honestly really, really incredible. So I don't regret my decision to graduate early just because I believe everything happens for a reason. And, if this was not meant to happen, it would not happen. And obviously, like saving a year's worth of undergraduate tuition money is going to make a big difference for my medical school debt that I will like accumulate. Um, and then also, I have not revealed this yet, but I will be attending Ross University School of Medicine in the fall in Barbados. Obviously, like I said, if I had taken the full 4 years, I would have probably done better on the MCAT and done better overall in my courses. And I may have had a multitude of options to choose from for medical school, but Ross University School of Medicine did accept me, and it was the only school that accepted me, which is obviously not something that we shoot for. We don't shoot for one acceptance. We shoot for as many possible acceptances, but it does only take one. Uh, and I'm so thankful for the opportunity to become a doctor. I'm going to spend the next 4 years studying and doing my absolute best so that I can hopefully match into a residency that I'm really happy with in a specialty that interests me. Like I said, right now I'm interested in plastics as a residency. That's a really competitive residency to match to. So I will try my best to make myself a competitive residency applicant. And I'm really excited for the opportunity to learn and study medicine. And although Caribbean island weather is not ideal for me personally, I am excited to live somewhere new and experience this new chapter. Uh, Thank you guys so much for joining me on my undergraduate journey. Honestly, undergrad has been an incredible 3 years. I've loved Rutgers. I've loved the people I've met at Rutgers. I just, I genuinely am so thankful for the experience I had during undergrad. I will continue to make videos throughout the summer and throughout medical school, but this is probably the last video I will be making regarding undergrad. So thank you guys so much for being with me on this undergraduate journey, and I look forward to sharing my next chapter with you.